Good evening. This is the Newbury Zoning Board of Appeals. It's Thursday, July 15th, 2021, 7:30. We have a little bit of housekeeping to do before we get on to the hearings tonight, so if you would bear with us for a second. I'm opening the meeting as the acting chair. Typically, zoning board of appeals appointments made by the select board are done in June. And so I'll make introductions and then continue. We have Martha Taylor from the planning board, who's our
planning director, and I'm helping out.
and she's helping out. Eric Swan, Howie Tracer, Mario Cannavale, Jack Kelly, and Larry Murphy. Larry Murphy is from the planning board. He's a liaison. So for the appointments, my appointment is up in June of 2022. Elaine Baker, who is not here, her appointment's up in 23. Mario Cannavale was an associate member and has been appointed a member. Jack Kelly was appointed associate member, so he's new to the board. And Howie Tracer has been appointed as an associate member. Howie asked to not be reappointed after a mere 22 years on the board, and would like to move on, but because of getting members, having assistants come and go and trying to keep things moving, Howie has kindly been reappointed till September. So now that we're at that point with appointments, we need 3 members for the board, and Elaine is not here as Mr. Tracer is now an associate member, so under the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 81Z, as the chair, acting chair, I can designate a member to replace a vacancy of Elaine Baker. So what I would do is designate Howie Tracer as a member to replace the vacancy of Elaine Baker until she returns to the board. She has some medical issues she's dealing with at the moment. So, Mario, Howie, and myself are the board members for tonight. The first new business is to reorganize the board since with the new appointments. And so with that, the board needs to select a chair and a clerk. And so we can do that by open discussion, or we can just do that by a motion. First.
Just make a motion to appoint Eric Stein, chairman of the board, zoning board.
In a second. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And for clerk. So I'll make a motion to appoint Mario Cannavale as clerk.
Okay, I'll second it.
All right. All those in favor?
Sorry.
Aye. 3 in favor. So as the board now has a chair, now has a clerk. Clerk may have had a little bit different term, but I think the clerk and for the board has meant that you're the vice chair if somehow the chair isn't here, and it goes to you. And associate members are part of the board, you're part of the hearing, you're part of the discussion, your voice is welcome and recommended. You don't have a vote, but your discussion and participation is appreciated and part of the hearings.
Thank you.
And Larry is here if we have planning board questions, since the planning board is the one that creates the bylaws and suggests them to the selectmen and then get voted on at town meeting, to sort of help for interpretation if needed. So we've got the new business out of the way. I think we're all set, Martha?
So,
Good with your folks there? Excellent. All right, so let's have the first public hearing. Mario, if you don't mind, I don't know if it's just sort of in tradition, if you want to read them, or
Sure.
me to read them?
Just
Read away for a public hearing.
start with the old public notice.
No.
Just go to public hearings. The agenda of the public hearing, CJ Dougherty, 335 Street. Applicant is seeking a special permit to allow for the renovation structure as it will result in upward elevation and outward expansion due to proposed deck and 2 landings with stairs. Continuance.
Hello again.
Congratulations.
And maybe take your names again, please, just for the record.
CJ Dard and
Sheila Grant.
Alrighty, so this is a continuance.
Correct.
We had some comments previously, and you submitted some dated documents. We've just got a binder to look at and review, it's nicely organized. So if we have any, do you want to make any statements or point out anything that was stated or adjusted or?
Sure, so the requests, we sort of had a mistake on our end of the overall height of the building, in large part caused by the doghouse walkout to the flat roof. We've eliminated the doghouse altogether and lowered the coffin hatch, so that reduces the height below, it reduces the top height below the 35 feet. I think we're 34 feet, 3 inches, so there's a little bit of buffer there. The other concern was that one of the steps had trespassed over the setback, and that was pulled back into the setback range. We also corrected the frontage to just show it as on Northern Boulevard. What else? And there was a small, I think I had the FAR as 20.61. If that's what's on the site plan, I had it at 20.51. So they all are in concert at this point.
And did we get, what was the status of the car parking?
Well, so I had a question with that, because I was a little confused, because a similar project on this property was approved in 2016 and parking wasn't brought up as an issue. The denial letter also doesn't bring up parking as an issue, it's an existing non-conforming. So we're just seeking the finding, and obviously as it doesn't have parking, we're not asking for parking, it's, the standard should be that it's substantially not more detrimental to the neighborhood. So I guess we're seeking some clarification there as well. I understand that there is a provision, but still, as it's existing non-conforming and it predates the code, because this structure was built in 1930.
Right, and so in terms of having an existing structure that you're totally demolishing and then rebuilding, right, you can seek a special permit finding.
Right.
And part of that is then of it's not by right to rebuild the same thing, it's to build something new and totally different. And in terms of the understanding that it's not more detrimental to the existing neighborhood, the question is, what does the existing neighborhood have or provide for?
Right, and the neighborhood doesn't provide for parking for this lot right now. We all know there's a dune there, and this has also gone through conservation, and there's not much that can be done.
Well, you brought up that this came before the board, and I would say it was probably an oversight that we didn't address the parking at that point. I can't remember the specifics of the hearing, but if we didn't address it, we probably should have. What we did in the past probably doesn't mean that you can do it now the same. And the other question I have, just for you, is when you were here the last time, you talked about getting an easement with a neighbor.
Sure.
So did anything happen with
Right,
that?
so to bring up to bring all that up was not to say we didn't get an easement.
Okay.
Just that the question of whether or not that's actually necessary. We would slightly disagree with that. Having said that, we have worked out an easement, not necessarily as close as we would like. It's on Donna's Way, it's about half a mile from the property, but we do have an easement that's ready to go should that become a contingency of your finding for the building permit, so we can exercise an easement for 2 spots in that property. And then we will pursue down the road actual parking on the site as well.
I don't think that the bylaw states how close the parking has to be.
Right,
Yeah,
and
just like-
in terms of the neighborhood, the neighbors, most of the neighbors have parking or have driveways and have parking on their lot. Parking on the street. And I think it's more of something that I think it's in the bylaws, but I think I'd be concerned if I had a property that didn't have any parking on it, and should something else change in town, or parking status on the road or right of ways be taken away, then you have a property that doesn't have any parking on it or may not have any.
Sure.
So
That notwithstanding, that as the person building it, I'm less concerned with that, because we said it last time, what I think doesn't matter, but the concept of, I think by right, with proper engineering, I can get permission to put a driveway in, but I don't necessarily have time to work that out prior to starting. So as of now, I have parking for construction during that process, and I've secured an easement for permanent parking. So I can always park and walk, which isn't convenient, obviously, for groceries and other things, but I would think that's my problem all the time.
And
Okay, the other thing I just wanna bring up, I'm certainly not a lawyer, and Larry would maybe know more than me, but I think we need more than just a statement that they have parking, correct?
Well, I don't know what you have in front of you.
Well, take a look,
Um,
I think it would have to go with the property, wouldn't it, with the decision.
But wouldn't that be a contingent of,
Right.
like when I go to get the building permit, when I can bring an easement?
Based on contingent upon that happening.
Right,
Certainly you
right.
would vote on that today
Yeah,
with
yeah,
that contingency.
Right,
Right, because I'm purchasing this property contingent on this board's decision.
right, no,
They're not
I
gonna
understand
create
all that,
Yeah,
all I was
yeah.
bringing up was,
So
I
this
don't think that,
That's not an easement, that's an
No. No, no, no.
intention to create an easement.
Correct, correct, so I'm saying that we reached an agreement to
Right.
create one, but
Yeah.
we can't put the cart way in front of the
right,
dog.
no, I understand.
Well, certainly too, they're not willing to sign an easement until they know that we're gonna get approval. I mean, so
What is the problem with parking on the property?
there is no parking. It's an existing non-conforming, so there is no parking. We haven't asked for parking in our plans.
And what do you need to do to create parking?
There is currently a dune in the front, and so we would have to go to conservation and work out something with them as to what would be acceptable. So at this stage of the game, that has not yet occurred. Although there has been some discussion with conservation. And the previous project did go through Concom and get an order,
Right,
which did not also have parking. And there is an existing decision from the ZBA here on this property that did not include parking as well
it's also not why we were denied. Our permit was denied
for upward.
for upward
elevation.
extension, and that was the only thing mentioned. The write-up that was done didn't match my application or the
Right.
denial letter.
Right.
So the verbiage of this hearing was changed sometime between my application and getting here.
and understanding building codes and bylaws and what you want to do, the building codes and bylaws are really there to protect everybody now and in the future.
Sure.
Yeah.
But the board certainly does have some discretion with respect to special permit process.
Understood, and I think not more detrimental to the neighborhood of something that is non-conforming and has a non-conformity, whether it's all or some non-conformities, than in terms of the betterment or not more detrimental to the neighborhood is something that is in keeping with the neighborhood and improves Plum Island and doesn't continue or exacerbate non-conformity.
Sure. But certainly, I mean, with all due respect, the existing structure is falling down. So certainly, anything that goes on this lot is gonna have the same problem. And we have to work within conservation, and certainly any order from this board would be subject to conservation approval.
And to that, I mean, the major corrections you wanted, I think we've come back with all of them. And in a 3-week period to find the easement period on Plum Island in Newbury wasn't a small task. Not everyone's so willing to say, oh, a stranger, yeah, you can definitely park
In
at
my
my
two
property,
spots,
yeah, indefinitely. So we were lucky to network enough till we found people who I think a big part of why they were on board with this is they wanted to see a constant improvement of Plum Island and to get rid of a building that's an eyesore would benefit that.
Understand, and it's the reason and interpretation, and it's been brought up and will be brought up again about the betterment of the neighborhood or not being more detrimental to the neighborhood and trying to improve properties to have and conform as much as possible and conform where they can conform, and there's a matter of opinion of pushing the limits of conformity, and then anything can be designed to meet everything, but it may not be the right house, right size house, depending on the lot, and the lot dictates it. So I think here, the idea is just to make sure that it is in keeping with the neighborhood, and the argument is, if there are other neighbors that don't have parking, then it would seem to be, the same or equal to or not more detrimental to the neighborhood. If everybody else has parking and they're off-street parking and they're taking care of their parking, then the issue of not having parking is.
Respectfully, though, it still goes to the argument as to whether it's substantially more detrimental. In this case, you have a structure that doesn't have parking and has never had parking going back to, I believe, the 30s. Therefore, as the neighborhood has changed, this structure has continued to exist without parking.
Yes, and if you were going after a variance, or if you were improving the existing structure by the fact that you're taking down the structure and rebuilding a whole new structure.
I believe if he could improve the existing structure, he would, but since it is in major disrepair, that is an impossibility.
So, understood, and so therefore then in terms of building totally new, the subjectiveness or interpretation of what is needed in terms of building something totally new is different than if you were fixing a porch or adding on to an addition of something that's existing and then evaluating it versus the existing and the existing neighborhood as something that's new. So.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, I thought you were.
No.
I don't remember going back to the last hearing. Is there a reason why you can't park under the house?
There are dunes to either side of the proposed construction.
Yeah.
The dune closest to the street is considered the primary dune.
Okay.
So what had happened in this property, they came before you, they received approval, then they went to conservation, they received that, it's the back portion of your package. This is the plan that you guys had last time that is for the notice of intent and the order of conditions. They allowed for a construction driveway for a year and a half to go over the dunes. They didn't allow for the construction of a driveway. The state law does allow for the construction of a driveway on a primary dune if it's that house's only means of access. But to go down that road would extend this for another year or so. So again, when I say we got the easement, I fully intend to pursue a driveway. I think I have every legal right to do that and construct a plan that'll do that. Last time I said I think I can. Think in having different things. But we have this in place until such time that I work through that process. But for right now.
Okay, so just, I understand exactly what you said. So if you had a driveway, you'd be parking in the driveway.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And most likely that driveway will end up either being one that's gravel that goes up onto the dune where the walkway is now, or it'll be a retaining wall similar to 88 Northern. They had a very similar situation there. They created a retaining wall that runs left to right across the property, just enough to get two cars in side by side. So that's ultimately going to end up with one of those two options. but it's just gonna take quite a bit of time. You can't file a new notice of intent with an open order of conditions. So I'll satisfy this one and then start that process over.
And that and the existing public way on the side of the property in terms of access down the public way. I don't know, driving engineering and Concom now.
Right. There's nothing in the bylaw that says that they have to have a parking spot adjacent to their house.
No, it says they have to have a parking spot for dwelling, so if they can show that they have a parking spot for a dwelling, then they can ask them.
Right, so, I think we shouldn't, worry about what Concom is gonna do.
Right, I think we asked about the parking.
Yeah.
Parking is the intent, the parking has been provided, we can condition the intent so that it's followed through on, and then we're at the bottom. Okay, parking.
So and I have do you have a full-size septic?
A full-size set.
That's a new one or you?
This is July 12th.
Yeah, it's flat, like, you got it.
Okay.
That's right, we brought one full-size septic.
So in a little bit of an issue, but in terms of printing these are stated to be at scale, but they're not actually to scale on how they were printed through the page numbers. So,
Wow, that just looks,
yeah, but it makes it extremely difficult to measure when everything is off by a foot or so. So in terms of the numbers and the measurement, they're close, but you know, not on, because it's not exactly 3/16 or an eighth of an inch. So I'll do a little bit of extrapolation to do the measurement. And then in terms of the roof height of 30, you've got drawings that say 33 feet to the top of the roof line from average grade. And then this one says 34, 3.5 average roof line above average grade. So
in either event, it's lower than the,
I know, but you're a stickler, you know, this is going on.
sure.
All this gets filed and all this paperwork, and the more paperwork we get, if there is a motion and it is approved, it gets filed with your deed, and any confusion or issues are your issues down the road, not mine. So it's, you know, and if someone comes back and then starts asking and pulls the documents and then stands before me and starts questioning the documents, and we're not here doing an official review, we don't have a third-party reviewer, but the point is just to get the drawings accurate, so.
Sure.
I'm spending my time going around.
Typo?
Yeah, no, it's definitely lower than the, I don't know which, I'm caught off guard by it.
So if you take, let's just start with what the average grade is. And if I go around the house and I look at the grade and I say the highest grade is 21.6 and the lowest grade is 18, and you cut that in half, you're somewhere around 19.9. You know, 22 feet is the average grade, and I know the elevation is somewhere around 20. So, and I know I just did it quickly, but the point of being at 22 feet, it's on here. Okay. This says 22 feet.
Right,
This
now
says
that was
55
established by the
feet.
surveyors.
This is, right, but you've got two drawings done in CAD, and you've got two different dimensions in CAD, so there's either somebody just overrid the dimension and wrote what they wanted in, or it's an actual dimension. So, and since the drawings aren't to scale, you can't quite put my scale on it and figure it out. Truthfully, if you didn't dimension it twice, we could have probably just gone with one, but now it's on the drawing, so I'm questioning. And also, you have a flat roof, and you're 34, 3.5, you're 8.5 inches away from 35, and you know, if someone challenges you or something like that, you're
Right, the parapet's also 4 feet, I can cut that down if we find that we're escalating our height for whatever reason.
yep, if it's 48 inches, you need to get 42 minimum, then you've got 3 inches. So,
Right.
but again, just being accurate on documents and then what is on the application, what's listed on the application.
34.6.
So this says 34 at 3.5. So now we got 3 different dimensions going around. And, you know, and it looks like you're there, but it's just gotta be accurate and it's gotta be not misconstrued on 3 different pieces of paper, that's all. So I don't think I have any issue with a flat parapet and measuring to a flat parapet. Average grade is confirmed and the real dimensions put on.
If we, could we take a vote and still, make it subject to fixing this? Because we're still within
Sure, we're still below
we're still below the height requirement, but to satisfy you and to make the plans absolutely clear. Make
Let's just
the-
say, for the moment, we obviously have the correct documents in the application to go on.
Sure.
Okay, so let's.
But we agree that we're still within,
Yes, I was saying that with a flat roof,
yeah,
with the height measured to the flat roof, to the actual average grade, if it is below 35 feet. And as you had mentioned, there is a little bit of room to have the proper guardrail around the house for the side, if there is a little wiggle. And we just need to have that proven out. And then the application has, what's the back, the back end setback?
10.7.
Uh,
Oh, no, that's the side, I'm
all right,
sorry.
so the right side, is it 57 or 66?
66 is what's on the application.
Right, so 66
So
is measured.
66 is the top elevation shown. 57 is from the porch.
Right, so
I think on the,
it should be 57 on the application. It's to the face of the porch.
Sure,
to the
no,
face of the structure.
I understand, so these plans were revised, between our last meeting and this one. And I think that 57 was had been 66, so I filled it out based on the application. The plans we had prior to the previous application, we didn't redraw the entire application.
So 57 feet is obviously, it's
correct.
more than 10 feet, but 57 feet is the correct number on the
Mhm.
application. Does that say 10.5?
10.5,
Yeah. So you get 10.8 on the plan, so make that 10.8 for side B.
side is 10.7.
And the rear's 57.
57.
Yep. Anything else matches? Oh, we have any more questions? Mario?
No.
Questions? Jack? Questions? Anybody new in the public has a comment to be made? For? Anybody have a comment against? None? I'll make a motion, have any discussion?
I think as long as they get the plans and the application correct, and it should be contingent on the easement, a legal easement,
Yeah.
not a piece of paper.
Sure.
I think we need more discussion.
Do we want to make a motion?
You're good at it.
All right, I'll make a motion to grant a special permit finding for the presented project for the new construction. Will not be more detrimental than the existing neighborhood. And it's in keeping with the abutting property for the following reasons: that it's within the FAR, it's within the lot coverage, it's within the height and the yard setbacks. And also in keeping with the number of bedrooms allowed. The conditions of the motion would be that legal easement for parking is presented. The construction documents are corrected to show the average grade and to show the height of the roof from the average grade. And that the application and the documents match the information provided.
Okay, second motion.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes.
Thank you.
You're doing a great job.
Sharing session. That's
Great.
great. We
Yeah,
have
we
this.
have multiple copies of that.
Yeah.
Make sure that stays on the record. You just file with the record. And so, the appeals period, we're looking for you to file updated documents.
Sure.
If you submit them as soon as possible, you can get them to Martha on the planning board, she can distribute them. We check them, I don't know if our process has been bring it up at the next meeting, or if it's been just to confirm.
Well, I think as long as you confirm that the numbers are right.
Right, so in the past, if you have submitted them to the planning board, they come, one of us checks them, one of us can confirm that the conditions are made, and we can note that back to you. That copy is then the record copy that gets attached to the motion.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we won't sign the motion. Look at that. And if there's any issue with the documents that one has, then the drafted motion and the documents will go through the chain of review. And if need be, we'll put you back, so double, triple check, please.
Absolutely.
And hard copy and PDFs, because we want to print the PDFs to attach to the.
Yes,
Yeah, which is what we've been doing anyway, yeah.
okay.
Good, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Happy
Good
building.
luck.
Kevlin Maritime LLC, 53 Northern Boulevard, applicant is seeking a special permit under section 97 4D5D of the Newbury zoning bylaws in order to demolish and reconstruct existing single-family home with a smaller footprint, increased height than existing, setbacks are still non-conforming, but improved for existing.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening, nice to see you again.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Boy, 2 weeks flies, doesn't it? Gentlemen, you recall at the last meeting, that certainly the most poignant point of the meeting was we went over revised attic designs to address the board's concern about the attic and the future use. So we had provided two options, and the board found our design option 2 acceptable, so we have adopted that as our attic plan. So I think that was, we were able to work through that. However, as you recall, we did continue the meeting because we, in order to get an opinion from town council with respect to the applicable standard of review from Mr. Callahan's. I'm sorry, Sean Callahan is here with me this evening as well, I apologize. I was so excited to get going. However, we did continue, and I do want to thank town council for providing an opinion, and Mrs. Hahn for forwarding that to me as well. There's a reason they call what I do the practice of law, because we're always learning, we're always changing, we're always gaining new knowledge, and That's certainly the case here. I very appreciate town council's opinion. It provided, for me, a really great framework for how to understand the review standard, and I hope you gentlemen found it helpful as well. So, as directed by council in their memo, in considering this application, we must first make an assessment of the existing structure and how it relates to the existing neighborhood. And then we start by first presenting how the proposed changes will impact that neighborhood and whether or not those impacts are significantly detrimental. We then need to look at the PIOD, and we must look at how those changes will impact the PIOD, and then for a finding, we need to show that those impacts will not be significantly more detrimental to the standards of the PIOD, and that further, they will not be substantially detrimental to the neighborhood itself. So although most of this information has been previously presented, I'd like to just run through it again in the context of town council's opinion and structure. I think then what we do is we take a quick look at the existing structure in relation to the existing neighborhood. And I think one of the best ways to show that is to, we had submitted with the application the assessor's maps. They're very, very enlightening. And as you recall, gentlemen, here we are, the little blue square. And I would present that our little blue square is very similar in size to most of this neighborhood. It's very dense, cottage-style, beach home neighborhood. And so we're really not significantly different than anyone else in the area. And I'll remind, there's a 40,000 square foot requirement in this zone. I wonder if how many of these you have to put together. Probably 10 or 12 of them to get there. So no one's meeting it, although there's one big lot across the street, but everyone else is far below. And then one last quick little look, if we could, and that is a close-up of Mr. Kevelhan's immediate neighborhood. And here we are in the yellow. And again, it shows that our house is relatively compatible in ratio to the lot sizes. This lot's a little bigger, but then again, so is the box. And another thing that's important to show in this is that I've marked each of the homes that have been rebuilt and are currently flood compliant, meaning they've all gone up in height. So you can see that all three of the homes across the street from Mr. Kevelhan are on pilings and are high. I suspect they're all less than 35 feet, but they are all 3 stories if you count the pilings. As well as this home directly behind us. This is a piling home, which is significant in height, as is this one. So we're not unique in the fact that we're looking to go up onto pilings. Many of the homes in the neighborhood already have. So that sort of gives you an understanding of how this house compares, the existing home compares to the neighborhood and the neighbors surrounding us. So now that we've at least got a consideration of that, the next thing we need to do is ask, how will the proposed changes impact the neighborhood? Okay, and then of course the follow-up will be, how do those impacts affect the neighborhood? So again, as you'll recall, we have presented in the past that in considering how the proposed changes will impact the neighborhood, well, we're moving the house back from the street and moving it towards the center of the lot. We are reducing our lot coverage. Although minor in reduction, it is nevertheless a reduction and certainly will result in a requisite or consistent reduction in environmental impacts. We always want to reduce lot coverage because it is beneficial to the environment. Although we are de minimisly reducing FAR, we are nevertheless reducing it. I think we could agree that we are improving the aesthetics of the structure. This new structure is professionally designed and will be built with top quality, energy efficient materials, and so will be aesthetically pleasing and certainly an upgrade of the existing structure. And that speaks to the neighborhood, as it will, as the value and aesthetics of our property go up, like the ones that have been rebuilt around us. That is beneficial to the neighborhood and values. People might consider the fact that we are going up, which we are, a detriment, but I would present that we meet the town's height limitations. And as we all know, those dimensional requirements are put in place to provide a framework for the town as to what's allowable. People have come to a conclusion that as long as we keep our structures at 35 feet or less, we should not be a problem, and that as long as everyone adheres to that standard, we will all be protected. So again, while some people may see a height increase as a detriment, we are not exceeding the limitations set by the town. Lastly, we are making the project flood compliant, and I don't think I need to spend a lot of time in suggesting that making a home flood compliant is beneficial to all surrounding properties. And in fact, as we know, it's a goal of the PIOD. So when you analyze those impacts that are proposed, those proposed changes, and you analyze those impacts and how will those impacts impact the neighborhood directly, I would suggest that we are not, on the whole, they're beneficial impacts to the neighborhood. And even if you, again, don't agree with the height, you could say that that's at best a neutral impact. But again, on balance, I would be hard pressed to say that these impacts will result in a significantly more detrimental impact to the neighborhood, when in fact some of them are helping things. Town Council also then suggested we need to look and do a similar analysis with respect to the PIOD, not necessarily just the neighborhood, but the PIOD district as a whole. And that you have to not only look at the PIOD and the impacts, but you have to look at the purpose and intent of the PIOD and look at how our proposal relates to those. And then you can determine whether or not those impacts are significantly more detrimental or not. I will remind you that we are rebuilding this house to meet all flood requirements. And again, I find it a little ironic that, but for the fact that we're increasing the height of this structure, this could be done as a matter of right. Just exactly what we're doing with the location, the fire, all of it could be done as a matter of right. But because...
I don't want to interrupt you.
Oh, no.
But Lisa Denis did get back to me that she did have an error in her citing of the special permit, that it's not 97-4 D5C. C is as of right, D is by special permit.
I saw that.
Okay.
No, but I'm just saying, but for the fact that we're raising the height, we would qualify under the by right. But because we are making the house flood compliant, we're changing the height. So, but the fact that we are meeting flood requirements is that's the one thing we're doing. We're meeting the flood requirements. We are not creating any new nonconformities. As I said earlier, most of the nonconformities are being reduced. We can't do anything about the lot size and the frontage, but the other nonconformities are being reduced, if de minimis or otherwise. So we are meeting that standard of not exasperating. So when we look at the standards of the PIOD, and it talks about, I want to have them in front of me. The standards of the PIOD to reduce damage to public and private property resulting from flooding, ensure public safety by reducing threats to life and personal injury, eliminate costs associated with flood responses, preserve open space, and limit the exacerbation of existing problems. Well, we are certainly meeting the goal to reduce damage to public and private property due to flooding, because we're going to bring the thing up into full flood compliance. I think we are ensuring public safety by reducing threats to life and personal injury by moving this house off the street. It's 3 feet from the street. That can't be good for vehicular traffic or pedestrians. So by pushing that house back, I think we are reducing threats to life and personal injury. Again, being flood compliant, we're eliminating the costs associated with the response and cleanup of flood conditions. Preserving open space, well, we're certainly not reducing the open space. As I said, we are reducing the lot coverage, thereby increasing open space. Not by huge amounts, we're not gonna have enough room for a public park, but technically we are reducing our footprint and therefore working to preserve open space. And we are limiting the exacerbation of the existing properties with respect to density and use by not increasing the footprint, but not increasing the FAR, but rather by minimally reducing them. So I think when you analyze Mr. Kevalahan's proposal with respect to the purposes, intent of the PIOD, I think we've hit on each and every one of them and certainly made an effort to move towards complete adherence with that. So now that we've sort of looked at what we're proposing is relative to the standards under the PIOD, council then says, and lastly, now you can look at whether or not the proposal will be detrimental to the neighborhood. And without going through it all again, gentlemen, I'm just going to suggest that given the fact that we are moving this thing closer to compliance with the PIOD standards of review, I would suggest that is a beneficial direction to be moving in. And even if you suggest that because some of our improvements are de minimis, I don't think that rises to the level of significant detriment, as council has graciously explained to us, is what significant means, and it is a fairly high standard. So I do believe that Mr. Kevalahan has met your standards. He's not going to be significantly more detrimental to the neighborhood. He's not going to be significantly more detrimental to the PIOD, and quite frankly, I think he will result in a benefit to the neighborhood in that this is going to be newer, nicer, more centrally located, and most importantly, flood compliant. I mean, I just can't, I think that is a huge benefit to the PIOD.
Well spoken.
Thank you.
Comments from
Well,
the board?
in general, not speaking from a bylaw standpoint, but a personal standpoint, I think that people should be able to build what they had before. And this basically is what they had before, except that it's been raised because of the pilings, which with the PIOD and the state, that's required.
Mhm.
So I don't think that because when I say forced, I mean it's a good thing, but since they've been forced to raise it, I don't think we should penalize them where they met the minimal as minimus, whatever you said. They didn't increase it, then they fixed the setbacks, and they are improving the flood. And in the general area close by, there are houses on pilings, and all over the island there's houses on pilings. So I don't think they should be penalized because it's on pilings.
All right.
Yeah, I think so. I kind of agree with, because it's on pilings, they are reducing, the ability of floods to, destroy and clean up and everything like that. So I kind of have to agree with you, Howard.
Jack?
I didn't, just a question, I didn't, for my own, I don't have the elevations. 2 stories, a story and a half before, And now it's gonna be 2 stories, a story and a half on pylons, is that what we're saying?
Yes.
No, it's currently 2 stories.
2 stories?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just,
Mhm.
very good.
Okay, so the one comment, so I had written the questions to town council.
Right.
You guys got that?
Yep.
Town council sent me a draft, I read it and said yes, town council then issued it on letterhead, you guys got that? I then sent my email to Mr. Shane with some comments, and my one comment was to point out the consideration that the assessment of the existing structure of the existing neighborhood. As an existing non-conforming structure may be by right, because it's of its current form and location, could be considered as a detriment to the neighborhood. Just because it's there doesn't mean it's great. Was explaining that, and that it's found, if that was found to be the case, then the proposed changes would need to be weighed against the metrics of the existing neighborhood and not just the improvements of one or some of the PIOT standards of the allowable dimensional control. And so again, I think what I was saying or trying to say is just understanding that if you had a great nonconformity and it's existing and somebody is rebuilding it, is the nonconformity a detriment into itself, or is it as compared to the neighborhood? And I think that was presented or shown, and certainly in terms of doing a drive-by, and then looking at the same information that's presented on my own from the MyMaps availability that the public has to look at to find the same information. You're looking at the neighborhood. So the one and only question that I have that remains in terms of the height of the building is the height of the first floor to the average grade as it is shown on the sectional elevation here. It says you have your existing grade, you have the average existing grade, you have the base flood elevation for zone BE is elevation 16. And then the design flood elevation, bottom of steel, is 25. And the grade slopes from the street towards the back. Is that correct? Yeah. So in terms, was the elevation set strictly on the flood elevation, or is it due to parking arrangements, you're trying to get parking underneath the house?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Eric,
What's the elevation, how was the first floor elevation set?
well, if I'm reading this correctly, they do give you the average existing grade elevation at 14.65. Correct? Am I reading that right?
Yeah.
So if I'm understanding, when we do average roof, or roof height, it's actually the measurement from that average existing grade to your mean roof elevation, it's not to the peak, it's across. So I think what,
I'm not questioning the height,
oh, okay.
I'm just questioning how
How
you
we-
set the first floor elevation, whether it's by floodplain or was it a decision to park cars underneath the house?
Are you parking cars under?
Yep, so it's under the structure, yep.
I guess I
So-
would have to, I'm sorry, I don't have the
I'm a little
expertise.
confused what you're asking. I hear what you're saying, but if they have the average grade and measured to the median height of the roof,
It's not the height, I'm just asking how the first floor was set, to
Okay.
understand.
All right.
Because they're within the maximum height, but if the first floor was set to provide more space or space for parking of cars, and it actually could be lower and still be within the floodplain, then the whole height of the house could be lower.
I get you now,
It's
what
just
you're asking.
what I'm asking.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure it out. And the cars have to come in from the side to park towards the back, is that,
No, it comes in from here.
okay?
Yep.
here, so where's the parking coming from?
Parking's coming in from North
From the
Boulevard. Yep, so it'll be essentially, can fit 4 cars underneath.
And currently, the parking is on both sides of
Yep.
the.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, I'm sorry we didn't have that
Well,
quite nailed down.
And I was-
What are you gonna do with the parking?
It just says design floodplain elevation, so I'm
Yeah.
assuming that in terms of this, that here's the average grade, this is where the first floor has to be.
Right.
Okay, and that it wasn't arbitrarily increased in order just to get the cars
Mhm.
underneath. And therefore, in terms of the
Right,
argument of height, the height is not maxed just to be maxed, the height is where it's at because of
Yep.
the split.
and do you think, Eric, because the drafts person or the architect or engineer,
Yes,
acknowledge that it is the designed flight elevation, does that give us, evidence that
yes,
they set it because it had to be that distance above this,
yes,
as opposed to just
I-
maximizing it, yeah?
yes, that's how I would have read the drawing,
Okay.
but I
Asking.
wasn't trying to bait and switch you, but I was just trying to ask you.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
In
No.
terms of the design, if there was any consideration, or the first floor was set because of this flood zone VE, and then you went from there. That's all. Kind of confirm how it was conceived and designed. So with that, is there anybody here that would like to speak publicly for the application? No? Is there anybody here that would like to speak against the application?
Oh, I do.
Your name, sir?
It's Joe Turner, the northern abutter to the project. Right now, I'm confused because I don't really understand everything that you all just seems like you've concluded. The Plum Island Overlay District. And we've spent 3 sessions, and it seems as though all that has been spoken, all that has been recognized, just went out the window. To me, this is what I feel. Let me just ask this question so that I can straighten out something in my head. If the applicant had moved the front setback back 10 feet, 10 feet, or 7 point something to come up to 10 feet, and has moved the back setback towards the front an equal amount, why can't we, and so they want to do the best they can to conform to the setbacks, why not set back to where it is now and go 32 feet back? You know, I'm just saying that it seems to me there is room for them to meet that 4th setback, and we're going by that, past that. I don't agree that I don't agree with everybody's, not everyone's, the usage of detrimental. I don't think it's just numbers. You know, it is our neighborhood, it's my neighborhood, and I don't, someone telling me that's not from my neighborhood, what's detrimental to me or not detrimental to me, or what makes my neighborhood look better or feel better, it's not easy for me to understand. But I want to. I think everybody's done a fine job of listening and explaining, but I just got lost.
So the discussion started about the proposal and the metrics of just what was listed in the PIOD for height, for FAR, for lot coverages, for yard setbacks. And so as the first measure of understanding what is being proposed, we use the metrics that are listed in the bylaws of what Plum Island overlay district allowed uses and allowed dimensional requirements are. And then the question was so focused on that in terms of what the PIOD was trying to do and what we wanted to bring to light into the discussion was the overall understanding of the benefits or the improvements to the neighborhood, or in keeping with the neighborhood, or not being more detrimental, as the words we use in terms of evaluating a project. And there are non-conformities that are, well, there's non-conformities such of the lot in terms of size that people aren't gonna get over, or rarely can get over without buying or joining lots. There are setbacks, there are houses that are actually over the lot and on other people's property, and obviously when they come before us, they gotta get the house off the other person's property, right? It's a big improvement. So if the proposed construction meets the dimensional requirements and they're within that, then they're doing what's allowed on their lot, which would be allowed on your lot. And we're not giving them any other different rights on their lot that you couldn't have for the zoning on yours. And that, in terms of the pure metrics of setbacks, and if they comply with the setbacks, I mean, they could choose to propose to move this house to within 10 feet of the rear lot line and still comply with the PIOD.
That's my point.
They-
Right now, they're not compliant.
They are compliant,
Well, at the front, they're not 20 feet back.
So-
If I'm
yes, and there is language in here that says, the Board of Appeals shall not make a positive finding for any alteration, reconstruction, extension of, or change such that would cause such structure to be located less than 10 feet from the side lot line or less than 20 feet from the street, unless a nearer lot line is already established by the existing buildings or would add a bedroom in excess of the provisions. So you have to meet the side, rear, the two sides and the rear setbacks. The front is considered so that you don't get grossly gaps where you would have house, and then somebody sets their house way back on a property and causes a little bit of inconsistency in the neighborhood. The fact that they're moving it back from the power lines, they're moving it back from a busy street. They could choose to put it and make the line between the two, your house and the next house in terms of the position, and put the building back. But we see that in terms of what's being presented as being more favorable to allow a little bit more space between the sidewalk and the street.
Right.
And we would ask that of most, and of some of these houses, like I think your house even has, your house is this house, has the porch or roof that steps back, and so the higher portion of the building is actually set back. And this building the new building that would come up would actually be in line with yours and would be in keeping with the neighborhood.
if I may.
Yep.
And I'm not gonna labor the point in it, I wanna respect your knowledge. And I don't know if I'm right or wrong about what I think I just heard, but if the proposal were to go as it is, and my house is, right now, my house and that house, the applicant's house, are almost identical, probably identical in their setback from the street, Northern Boulevard. With this proposal, when they go back 10 feet, that's the first 10 feet there's a porch and 3 feet. And there's my porch and there's my 3 feet, our 3 feet. Then they go back ever how many feet to start triple decks, 12 foot by 30. So therefore go back 12 feet. So if my home or their home is 30 feet deep, when this project's done, the decks will be back, the setback in the decks will be at around 22 feet, more than halfway down my driveway, which is adjacent to my home. So all of a sudden, to me, I have an empty lot with two big decks on it instead of a home. And that to me is I've lived there for 40 years. I don't see how we can sit here and say that them moving back 10 feet is beneficial to the neighborhood. Then they put two decks that take up 12 feet, And I'm gonna go out, we're gonna go out our door, and we're gonna see setback, then we're gonna see 12 feet, two decks, 30 feet by 12 feet. Then we're gonna see the house. And the house is gonna be 2/3 of the way down my house. It's like you took the house away and you moved, when I said to go back, to make myself understood, and I appreciate being listened to. When I said to go, they could be in compliance, it was just to say that the 10 feet isn't in compliance, so why are we talking about its benefit if they could in fact go to the back of the house and be totally free and make that claim. But to make the claim without 100% of the setback, to me is not, this is not a house that's at the end of a 1/4 mile driveway where you're driving up and you see these nice decks. It's right there in your face. And what I don't like about it, and whether I gotta believe, after all these years of living here and doing my share, that I shouldn't have to go out my door and see 22 feet or thereabouts of decks, and decks in a setback. And the reason for those are obvious, if not spoken, but you change. That's a big change to my immediate neighbor. I mean, how much can a person accept?
I understand what you just said, but I think in terms of the 10 feet is less than 20. If they moved it back 20 feet, you would definitely not be seeing anything in terms of where the decks were placed.
Right, but that wasn't my point.
I know, I'm just
Okay.
pointing out in terms of making an argument against what you're saying, but.
Okay.
And if in terms of drawing the lot line to your house to the house that's one south house of the proposed property that we're talking about, it's the 10 feet back is almost within line. And our bylaws don't cover every situation. And there are things that come up with these decks and the roof heights that we ponder over again and again. And we have brought up some comments to the planning board about trying to clarify some of these terms or add definitions so that we have more guidance in which we're doing. At the same time, I don't think anybody wants to have the bylaws adjusted so much that they're so onerous. So there is some leeway and understanding in terms of what the interpretation is. And I think we haven't said it yet, but having cars or having room to pull off the street onto your property before you're into your parking space is typically an improvement for most properties. The one, and I'm not trying to make arguments for the applicant, but their cars will no longer be adjacent to your house, but will be tucked underneath the house, which will provide more open space between your house and their house.
Well, is that true?
Yes, that is true.
Okay, so parking will be under the house, not aside of the house.
Right.
Not in the back of the house.
Correct.
Under the house and there only.
Cars will be parked underneath the house, so they'll actually have more, I won't say plannable, but they'll have more area around the house, more space around the house. So.
I just want, while we're on that point, because it's important, are we stating for a fact that the parking for that property will be under the house only?
There is no hardscape shown on the drawing that alludes to that. Is there on the plans, on the floor plans that were presented?
No, I think the existing conditions shown is forever.
Side yard 12, 21, 5, 15, 8. Not Valley or?
Okay, could I just look at that plan from you? I'm sorry, I don't have that one.
That's the same as this one without the lot think Doug covered it.
Well, with all due respect, I would like to point out that, Mr. Turner's home, he parks his car on the lot line to Mr. Kevlin's home.
I don't know, we just did say you were parking cars underneath the house, and so if in terms of improvement and betterment and fixing your property, that just kind of came up, that's all.
I mean, after all, it's tiny.
So that's Mr. Turner.
Or Jack. I guess we have to decide whether or not, are you gonna park underneath or not?
Well, we designed the house to have a parking, for the home underneath. Would suspect on Plum Island, it's nice to have guest parking, but, that's up to Mr. Kevlin.
Are you just contemplating just underneath the structure, or is it just on Mr. Turner's line?
I'm thinking that we're getting to the point that we'd like to have something proposed so it's defined and there's an understanding, whatever that understanding may be.
You said, is there space for 4 cars underneath?
Yeah, there's 4 cars. So again, this is my parents' home, right? So obviously, myself and my sister and stuff will be coming too, right? So, but within the context, there's 4 cars that's underneath the structure.
Does Concom require gravel and pavement be shown on their plan?
Sure.
They probably will,
Yeah, you need to show pervious and impervious surfaces. And we're not proposing to make, any of the existing impervious surfaces around the home pervious. Because you're parking under, they look at the house as the pervious, so we're not increasing. Our lot, impervious surfaces is not increasing. In fact, because we're reducing the footprint of the home, we are technically reducing impervious surfaces on the lot.
Understood. The question is the location of parking defined on the property? And are you proposing to keep it open and have gravel across the whole front so that you can park more cars on the property?
I think it was something that we were going to bring up to conservation. If they only have 10 feet of frontage, they can't park in front of the
Yeah,
house.
we can't park in front of the house.
Right, they can park on the side. I don't know, just ask.
Yeah.
Saying it's not defined, somebody asked the question, I brought it up, that cars are being parked underneath because I was told that, so it seemed like it was an improvement. I was trying to offer something else as an improvement, and now we're discussing whether it actually is gonna be or be that. That's where we're at. So, just trying to look for an understanding.
I would think that if there's room for 4 cars, that would typically be the majority of the time that cars would be parked under.
Yeah, the house in the back has their cars underneath, but it looks like they have space on the side to park as well. So,
Yeah, I don't think we need to make a condition that they don't park.
Well, if I may, may I?
yes, please.
What I'm requesting is an answer to, is the parking going to be 4 cars maximum under the house and not elsewhere? The whole idea is to not revisit and have problems if we can address them now.
Mr. Chairman, I can answer that question through you if,
No, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry.
You came in late.
Oh, congratulations.
Thanks.
I'm sorry. In all honesty, this house was designed to create four parking spots underneath, and that is the intention. But it, you know, we are not proposing necessarily that we were gonna eliminate the existing gravel on either side of the home. I mean, right, that was
Yeah.
never discussed, it was never proposed. So in asking the question, obviously the primary parking will now be focused under the home because you wanna get your car out of the sun, out of the snow, whatever. But there was no intention
Mhm.
to necessarily remove that other parking. You know, it's a multi-generational family use here, you know, mom and dad are there. You know, Sean comes with his family, his sister comes, you know, there could be more than 4 cars.
Yeah.
It's nice to have that. But
Yeah, I don't know if there's a limit on cars, or I don't know if there's, DPW or there's any other ordinances in town about curb cuts and,
And if they're parking on the side right now, the curb cuts are probably theoretically already there.
right, but now they're getting a new curb cut, which is in the front, and so now that there's, you know, existing curb cuts are existing curb cuts, new or new, and that leaves it open to discussion. And I don't know if that's our purview, I don't think it is our purview.
no, but I do agree that the DPW may have something to say about that when you go in for your curb cut straight under the house. They may in fact say,
Yeah.
you've gotta close them off.
So, understanding what you said, understanding that we brought it up, understanding it's not, the curb cut issue really isn't our purview to make. He's providing parking.
Yes.
Others, yeah, is there someone else?
Yeah, my name's Sam Paterno, and I'm the abutter next door. And, so if this is gonna be a retirement home and these people are gonna fit into the neighborhood, they don't think that maybe as a good gesture, they could say that they're not gonna park on that side of the house. Even their 40-something years, they're parking underneath. If their parents are gonna live there, they can get a sticker and they can park 2 cars on the street if they had company and have 6 cars. So, you know, one to fit into the neighborhood, and we got quite a few people here from the neighborhood. And if that's the intention, and it's not gonna be a rental with 4 cars underneath and 3 other cars on the side of our house, and we see all of them every time we go out, you know, out looking out. You know, could that be a goodwill gesture from the people that are looking to build this house to, you know, the neighborhood and to the other people that have lived here? And we are in retirement. I mean, this is our retirement home. I would look to hear something from the owners.
Yeah, if I may, my name is Bob McCarthy, I live on 20th Street.
Yes.
We are a true neighborhood. All of us here have lived there for 40 years plus. And there are 2 other neighbors who couldn't be here, who have been there for 40 years also. So we are a true neighborhood. And we are welcoming to people. But my concern is, and especially with what's being discussed right now with the parking, is that this is going to be a short-term rental property. And as those are sprung up over the island, you know, I understand people, when they go to rent a place for a week or 2, they want vacation, they want to have a good time, they want to enjoy themselves. And I get that, but this is not Las Vegas. It's mine. And the noise level goes up, the level of police activity goes up, the fireworks go up, and it affects the neighborhood. It's, you know, so we're not talking about a building. I mean, the building looks beautiful, I'll grant them that. I'm talking about the usage of the building itself and how that will impact us as neighbors. Now, I'd like to take people at their word when they say that this is what's going to happen. But as someone once said, trust but verify. You know, and I don't know if there's any way of verifying the fact that this is not going to be a business rather than a home. So that's my concern.
I can just say from a zoning board perspective, that's not under our.
Right, I just want to express my feelings, that's all, is we're talking about, you know, the effect on the neighborhood. My second issue is that we had a fire across the street from us a couple of years ago, a 3-story house completely up in flames. And if not for the neighbors, prior to the fire department getting there, 4 or 5 houses would have been lost, because we are so tight. And the fact that this house is gonna be shifted that much closer to the Turner's house, reducing the area between the two, if either one of them, God forbid, should catch fire, they're all gone. You know, so, I mean, that seems to me should be some kind of concern as to how close this house will be to the Turner's house. I mean, it's close now, but you're gonna move it over how many feet closer to the house? I mean, that's,
It is a valid concern, but if they are, and every property has the same yard setback. So if they are within the setbacks,
okay.
and if they are greater than the setbacks, then, you know, they're
Yeah, okay.
10 feet, they're 12 feet. So they're actually better than what the minimum could be.
Yeah, that was just a concern of mine.
Yep, and as Howie had said before, we do get jaded by people that present something and then switch it and it turns out to be something later, and some of the angst and additional conversations are memories of something that looked like a duck, smelled like a duck, but we couldn't quite have the authority to do it, and it came out as a duck where people had, I don't know, bedrooms or porches that kind of sort of, so those issues we do like to hear and we do need to hear, and we'd like to, actually, if you have a great complaint, it should go to the planning board because they're the one that proposes changes to the bylaws.
Mhm.
And then the town votes on them and then we interpret them and enact them. So I don't want to say that we're not listening to you, but as Howie said, it's not really our purview. If the use and looks like a home and it is a home, there's only so much we can do after saying it's a home. So I do appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Gentleman in the back, yelling.
Yeah, hi, I'm Florencio, I'm also from Tunnisky. I guess I kind of felt like Mr. Turner did at the beginning. From the first meeting, it sounded like this was not meeting guidelines. And there was a lot of back and forth about that. And now I'm hearing you guys basically saying, well, I guess if it's this size before, it can be this size again. Does it now meet the guidelines and we misunderstood? Or are we just interpreting things differently, or what's going on with the bylaws and guidelines for this? That's what confused me.
We asked an opinion of town council how to interpret the conditions. And we got a thorough
Memo.
response and memo, and we're trying to follow what the guidelines were from town council, how to interpret the bylaw.
Correct, and
I mean, excuse me, but I heard you say specifically, when you first responded, saying, you don't know exactly by the bylaws, but you're giving your opinion that you should be able to have the same house.
Right.
That's what I'm saying,
Right.
it sounds like the
Right.
bylaws are being
No,
oversight.
no, that was not my point. That was a personal point of view. But if you follow the interpretation that we got from town council, it follows the same as my personal opinion.
so the whole point is that there are metrics in which to base a an application can propose something new and follow the guidelines. But in terms of what the town council said, that it is both the metrics listed out in the section, but it's also compared to the neighborhood. So if everybody on Plum Island has a non-conforming lot, and there's very few that are actually conforming. So everybody's in the same boat. There are other, what we were trying to get at first is trying to understand substantially more detrimental, substantially less detrimental. How is this improved, and how is it improved, and then what is it improved against, and against the neighborhood? So in terms of comparing the house to the proposed new construction, that's what we were looking at. And part of it was that we were really trying to ask the applicant to make their own argument without us trying to make the argument for the applicant. And so as we sought town council and town council replied, then the applicant made the argument with the understanding of what town council had said.
So
One
did,
more.
so did town council say that you can rebuild what you have and just put it up high? I mean, was that what their, I mean, I didn't hear their exact thing, I heard what the lawyer said in the interpretation, which
Yep.
was, but did they say that?
In terms of what they said is that implying the substantially, to judge whether substantially detrimental to the neighborhood, understanding what substantially means, understanding what detrimental means, understanding the phrase not more detrimental, are some of the interpretations implied. And so with that understanding, yes, there is, a special permit by finding, somebody can take something down and put something back if it beats the, if it is within keeping our interpretation of the neighborhood. So yes, town council did provide that direction.
But I mean, that doesn't,
They,
it doesn't seem like that they can take what's there. I mean, then I don't understand what the reason is for any kind of.
because the bylaw,
Meaning because you can take your house and just put it up on pilings, basically, but was there non-conforming? I mean, when we voted in water and sewage for the island, we were, promised that there wasn't gonna be tons of building. I mean, we all know here that didn't happen. And this was, and non-conforming lots were supposed to, bring in, not by a minutiae of a point, but, into more conforming. And that if you can take everyone's house and put it up on pilings, I mean, what is the sense? And, so I know this is beyond the scope of everything here, but just so that you understand, I mean, you talk about detrimental to the neighborhood is here and saying, and I would still like to hear from Kevin, is he gonna reach out his hand? I reached mine out to him, and I don't see anything reaching back.
the piling issue forces people to come before us, and it is an improvement to not keep or provide betterment for flooding and drainage on the island. So the pilings are seen as a benefit.
It's a requirement.
Yes, it is a requirement. The understanding of the bylaw in terms of comparing it to the neighborhood is to try to provide some order, limit some building, but also allow owners some flexibility with the understanding that most of the lots are non-conforming and you couldn't meet the general bylaws. And so the rights that we look at in terms of improvement or what's being proposed is, could that be built? I mean, could that be built on the next lot? Does this proposal, could you do the same thing? Yes. And if you were within the setbacks, could you do the same thing? Yes, you could. You have those same rights. And some people get upset because it's something new and it's seemingly bigger, but the fact is that you have the same rights to do the same thing, whether you take advantage of that or not. You do have those same rights, and we're not looking to give a property owner any different rights than we would.
No, I'm not saying that you're being favorable to one and not to another. I mean, I totally understand that. I mean, but I guess, we're talking about Plum Island and our way of life, and it's gone, basically. So, Kevin, I don't know if you're gonna answer me or not, or you to think about that?
He can't speak to you.
Directly. Or can you speak on his behalf?
I can't speak on his if he'd like to respond.
Yeah.
That's up to Eric.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
No,
I forget where I am.
good. I would say that response should happen outside the application and zoning board review process.
Excuse me. I know it's getting late, and I know all that, but this is the shot. Are you saying that we cannot put parking onto this, to this application? I mean, how can you not address parking on a whole completely new project? I mean, especially on Plum Island. I wanna know that the applicant is not parking where he should not be parking, and is parking where he should be parking, and more importantly, when people come to visit the applicant and they're parking where they shouldn't park because they don't know better, I don't wanna be dealing with them at all. And parking is gonna be an issue. Of course, the decks will probably be an issue, but for tonight, since we've lost all wind, I would like to get at least the issue of parking addressed. And I feel that it should be able to be addressed by the zoning board itself. I mean.
The zoning board has a requirement in the bylaws to provide parking for structures. The parking is being provided. The applicant did say the parking is going to be mainly underneath the house. I don't think we have any metrics to say that their parking can't happen. If Concom has issues about dunes or impervious surfaces, they can make comments or findings or limitations to that.
Okay, if I don't want to interrupt you. Sorry.
No, I don't think it's in our purview.
Well, where can I get that information?
Conservation Commission could impose restrictions on the type of.
Or how about this question? Where do I go to find out how many cars can park on the property? For this size building, for this amount of bedrooms, or how it's looked at? There has to be an answer to the question.
Mr. Chairman, I could answer that in short order to you.
Yeah.
And that is that, first of all, it's very interesting. I've never had a case where we were arguing that a property on Palm Island had too much parking. But the regulations that apply to everyone set a minimum requirement for parking. And this board does have, as you discussed in your prior hearing, if a project is not providing the required parking, then you can. But there are no restrictions within the zoning that limits the amount of parking you can have. Of course, the zoning would prevent you from renting parking or doing something like that. But if somebody wants to have more than the requisite 2 spots, they want to have 4, 6, 8. There's nothing in the zoning that prevents that, although as the chairman has pointed out, there are other regulations that apply to the lot. They could restrict the parking in terms of impervious surfaces through the Conservation Commission, curb cut allowances through the DPW.
Yep, so that is true. It's 97-7D parking talks about the minimum requirements per a site, in which the last applicant, we were telling them that they needed to at least meet the minimum. There is no maximum, and the planning board has the right to reduce that by special permit if it's before the planning board. So,
Eric, if I might, to the gentleman's point, did the applicant restrict himself by citing 4 spaces under the building as a betterment? I mean,
if that was said,
I didn't present that the adding spaces to the lot was a betterment. I think Mr. Kevelighan responded to the chairman's question. Am I correct in understanding that you are going to put parking under? And the answer was yes. And then we were asked, well, what are you doing to the other parking? And again, we had not proposed to change or restrict that existing, gravel scenario.
okay. All right, so I'm gonna close. We got one more person.
Yeah, Dave DeLuca,
Yeah.
I live on 20th Street. Question about safety. Now, we have a crosswalk across the restaurant, okay? There's a crosswalk there. There's 18th Street. There's no sidewalk there. That's the apron to that street. People on the sidewalk waiting to get in and out of the restaurant. They start parking 4 cars underneath their house. That's all their apron to their driveway now. There's no sidewalk. That sidewalk goes away, but I'll let car traffic go on and off all the time. That's a mecca for families to go across to the ocean and back. That right away to the beach. It's the main thing that we're all here. You understand? So if you're going to take away that curb, that sidewalk, that's adjacent to that, that's gonna be a big deal, okay? Backing in and out of there, 4 cars, then you have 5 cars. Just look at the stretch there, okay? And look at where the sidewalk is, as to where the crosswalk is. I mean, you're gonna have, and then you have the street there, then you have the restaurant, and then you have the lot next door, which they have parking there as well. Now you're gonna have that whole thing wide open, and it's gonna be one giant apron going across, except for that short curb that you're gonna have in front of the restaurant.
Yeah,
You're gonna have a lot of people backing in and out of there, and people trying to get to the beach with their kids and all their wall wagons with all this stuff all day long. I mean, just take that into consideration, please.
understand your concern, but they can't interrupt the sidewalk and they can't park on the sidewalk. People in the DPW may have issues with the number of curb cuts and the location of curb cuts. And again, unfortunately, that's not our purview to make.
Well, maybe you can make this whole thing a contingent to what they have to say. I think that's important. You know, start carving away that much sidewalk.
Have you gone before Concom yet?
Nope.
So they have yet to go before the Conservation Commission and have the plans
I
reviewed.
think all that sidewalk should be addressed, sir. That's all.
Get all that, Mark? So we're left hand start. All right, we close the meeting. Any discussion?
I think they presented a good reason why they qualify.
And I think based on town council's recommendation that, we use that as a qualification.
Is there a motion?
You can make the motion.
Make the motion. I will grant the motion for a special permit finding for the proposed construction as the proposed plans are not substantially more detrimental to the existing neighborhood. That the side yard backs are met. The front setback has been improved and is in keeping with the existing building line.
Excuse me, Eric.
Now the meeting's closed.
The FAR and coverage are over and noted to be so, but they are in keeping to the size of the existing neighborhood. Conditions of the motion are that it needs to meet COMCOM's review and approval before the motion can be signed. So,
Would you want to add that the height's been increased because of the filing requirement? Maybe.
height has been increased and is in keeping with the PIOD. Height limit of 35 feet. Any other motion made?
Okay.
Any discussion on the motion or
No, I'll second it.
second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
There's a point, just one point to make, that typically we make our motion passes, and then it goes to the other town boards and has its own way, and if something changes, then it has to come back. And so the one unique part of this motion is that we're looking for COMCOM to approve the site plan before we sign and make our motion official. So if there's issues with Concom and you wanna bring up the sidewalk, you have to go to Conservation Commission. And whether it's totally in their purview or not, I do not know. But we made a special notion just so that we keep things in order and everybody knows what's going on before the motion is signed. I think that's what we did. That's the record.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, last one.
Last one.
All right, Barry Kaplan, 5 Dudley Way, applicant is seeking a special permit finding as the proposed new dwelling increases the building height due to the fact that the new dwelling will require ground pilings and design of dwelling.
We don't always envy your job. I think you're doing amazing to understand all this. And protect what needs to be protected.
Trying. All right, this is a continuation, so we had some comments and questions previously, and we look to address those.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening. For the record, Douglas DeShane from Finneran and Nicholson, representing Mr. Kaplan, who is here with me this evening. As presented, this is a continuation of a previous hearing, and I did not have the pleasure of attending that previous hearing, but have was brought up to speed with Mr. Kaplan, and he explained to me that the board went through the proposal comprehensive review, and that there was a determination made that certain changes needed to be made to the plans to bring them in conformance with the board's requirements. And so I did, on July 7th, with the assistance of Mr. Kaplan, put together a memorandum whereby we provided to you all of the changed and revised information. So we did present to you existing and proposed site plans showing conformance with all required setbacks. We provided a revised application with your worksheets so that all the setbacks of the proposed versus existing and requirements were consistent with the plans, and again showed conformance. We did, I assume, the elevation plans that of the existing and the proposed heights were added, showing the median heights so that they would substantiate the numbers that were provided on the charts. We've provided you the floor plan of the existing structure so that room count could again be verified. We did provide elevation plans of the proposed structure with heights. And lastly, the architectural plans were relabeled with regard to the storage area so that it could be concluded by the board that the storage area met the requirements of the board. Again, in discussing the matter with Mr. Kaplan, he felt that the board was satisfied with the presentation and with the proposed structure, and that all of these plans though needed to be verified. But that perhaps the biggest discussion and issue at the last minute meeting was with respect to the fact that Mr. Kaplan's home had a second unit in it, has a second unit in it, has had a second unit in it, and that in reconstructing the house and making it conform to all the dimensional requirements other than and an increase in height, he was continuing that second unit. And so one of the things that Mr. Kaplan and I discussed and that I would like to present to the board tonight is our position with respect to that situation. I will agree. I believe there was a comment made at the board at the last meeting that the PID does not allow for the construction of two-family homes, dwellings or accessory apartments, if you will. However, the BIOD does state that it shall not apply to pre-existing non-conforming uses. It is Mr. Kaplan's position that the existing second unit is in fact a pre-existing non-conforming use, and therefore, in analyzing the application of the PIOD to his proposal, PIOD expressly says that it doesn't apply to pre-existing uses. Therefore, he is entitled to recreate the second unit within the new structure. In support of that position, please note that the existing dwelling has been recognized by the assessor's office as a two-family dwelling, and that Mr. Kaplan has been taxed on the building as such, and I have provided you a copy of the assessor's information. Furthermore, I presented a letter that Mr. Kaplan received from the Newbury Board of Selectmen acknowledging that the house was a two-family dwelling in a letter written to him addressing assessment of his home, and I provided that to you as well. Since at least 2006, the town of Newbury has been charging Mr. Kaplan water, sewer fees, and betterment fees based on the property being, in fact, a two-family dwelling. Lastly, we discussed the issue with the Newburyport building inspector. Newbury building inspector, and Mr. Kaplan can attest to the fact that Mr. Bennett said that he had reason to rely on the assessor's information. I know Mr. Bennett is fairly new, so he couldn't,
2 years.
Yeah, and it's new. So he couldn't rely on his own, personal knowledge, but that he did rely on the assessor's information and the past history in the town dealing with the property in accepting the determination that the house was a two-family. Please note that neither the town or its building inspector, even those building inspectors prior to Mr. Kaplan, have ever taken any action in questioning Mr. Kaplan's use of the property as having two units, and they certainly have not indicated any intention to do so, despite the fact that for at least the last 20 years, the town has been well aware of the fact that the property has been utilized as such. So we are arguing that impliedly all of those actions and non-actions of the town, acceptance of taxes, requirements of betterments, are all recognition that this house has been and is a pre-existing non-conforming two-family. I will also remind the board that in April of 2006, the Zoning Board of Appeals for Newbury made a favorable finding and approval in response to a request by Mr. Kaplan back in 2006 to change the roof lines and increase the height of the dwelling as it exists. At that time, the house was a pre-existing non-conforming two-unit dwelling, and yet the board did approve the proposed reconstruction without any question of the existence of or the continued use of the second unit. With all due respect, Mr. Kaplan has requested the necessary permit to physically reconstruct his pre-existing non-conforming structure as he is proposing to change the roof line and the height. And again, other than the fact that he's raising the height, I understand his proposal, the structure will be fully conforming to all setbacks, FAR, lot coverage. And again, we're here though because of the proposed roof line change and the height increase. But once again, we are in a situation where the height of the building is being raised because it's being put on pilings as required. I will also remind the board that in reconstructing the house, he's reducing the size. He's making it smaller. And in fact, a big part of that reduction comes from the fact that the existing second unit, which is currently 864 square feet, is being reduced to only 300 square feet. And he's taking what is a two-bedroom second unit, and he's reducing it down to one bedroom. So he is certainly reducing the intensity of that pre-existing non-conforming use. And again, he's doing that the reduction of the house, the rebuilding of the house, he's doing it in a way that will allow it to meet all dimensional requirements, including fire and lot coverage. In fact, a number of those existing nonconformities would be totally eliminated, not just de minimisly made better, but eliminated, and no new nonconformities will be created. Again, there's nothing we can do about the nonconforming lot and frontage, but Mr. Kaplan, I think, has done an amazing job in eliminating all other nonconformities. So the building will be conforming. We have not asked for a change in the pre-existing use, but rather permits to allow for the structural reconstruction. And we'd ask the board to consider our position that it's a pre-existing non-conforming use. And we've done everything in our power to provide evidence that the town is in agreement with that position. So I'm happy to discuss that issue, but also too, I didn't mean to imply that we're not willing to go back and, reanalyze the revised drawings, the heights, all of those things. But again, as Mr. Kaplan seemed to indicate, you guys have done a good job of that before, and you are comfortable with the fact that we're eliminating all the nonconformities, including fire and lot coverage. So I don't want to take the time, unless you want to hear me, to go back through the analysis of the PIOD and the impacts. But this one certainly, I think, is a home run, right? We're eliminating all of the nonconformities, structural nonconformities. We're making it flood compliant. I would argue that we are doing everything that's listed under those PID standards. We're eliminating nonconformities, we're not exacerbating them. We're doing the flood thing, safety, all of those things. We're preserving open space. It's getting smaller, guys, it is. But even though he's gonna make it smaller, he would like to keep his pre-existing use. But I would hope the board would consider that he's drastically reduced that use. So we're happy to answer any questions or present any information that you'd like to hear.
Okay, at this point, I'll just, for the record, Martha, state that there is nobody here. Would anybody like to speak in favor of the project?
I am in favor.
State your name, please.
I'm Deborah Furley.
She lives in the house with me.
Just state your name and address and say that you're in
5
favor.
Tivoli Way, Newbury.
Sorry, how do you spell your last name?
F as in Frank, I-R-L-I-T. It's a good Polish name.
And there's anybody here to speak against it? No. Okay. Is there any discussion or debate?
I think they came back with,
Yeah.
everything we asked for. The only thing I'm gonna question, not to make things more difficult, I'm gonna ask Larry, if I can. So he has an apartment.
Yeah.
Within it. It's not technically a accessory apartment, it's in an accessory apartment, everything has to be subservient to the main dwelling.
Okay.
Does this have to be separate as far as utilities and services?
As far as the PIOD goes, well, first of all, let me say, I can't give a legal opinion.
No, I'm asking a planning, is there anything in the bylaws that says that it has to be separate?
Separate in what sense?
Separate utilities?
Not that I'm aware of.
That was my only question.
Yeah.
So, okay.
So
Well,
I think if it's pre-existing the way it is and there's nothing in the bylaws, I don't think we need to require that it has to be separate.
I agree. Jack?
Yeah, we're not proposing, it's all one now.
Right.
It's only 1 meter, one,
You
and that is how Mr. Kaplan is proposing to reconstruct it.
with the accessory apartment, it specifically says what it has to be.
Understood.
Yeah.
So, appreciate your full presentation, discussion, and argument. Shane.
I argue.
What?
I don't argue.
Yeah, your presentation of the project. And I would say that the original submittal did not have all this information, and so when we see something that looks fishy and abnormal and we don't know what it is, we question it. And if it's stated and the documentation is provided, then everybody understands what's going on. So that where we started with this and the understanding. Things have changed since 2006 in terms of the accessory apartment section being added and even updated once it was added to clarify it. And so if it looks like a duck, it smells like a duck.
Yeah.
There's a duck. And so we're thinking that the accessory apartment, which was added, was doing that to control, but also provide for these apartments in Newbury. It's not that accessory apartments are seen negatively, it was actually added as a benefit. And then, as Mr. Tresker was saying, and I was thinking, he said it first, that the difference of making an accessory apartment is subservient to the primary dwelling. And it all talks about how entries and sizes and utilities are all related to the primary property. So I don't think we have anything. I would think that we could move forward, and then we might just ask the building inspector if there's a technicality of a two-family, being a two-family, that it has separate utilities, and it's up to the building inspector to say that by code or whatever he's gonna say.
Yeah, I would think that issue would come up when you apply for a building permit.
Correct.
I would expect.
So I'm just saying that we don't have purview to that. I think we just said we don't see it quite in the bylaws, but because we want to make it as proper as possible, I would think we would have some condition to go back to the building inspector and at least just ask him.
Sure.
And he'll tell you, it's right
No,
here.
we're happy to do that, and this was an
Building
interesting.
code or with something, and it says right here, you have to do X or Y. And
Right.
Then you have to comply, because it's
Yeah, no, it was an interesting scenario. I mean, I have yet to come across another situation like this, especially on Plum Island.
So sidebar, I think shall not apply to pre-existing non-conforming uses, and in the past, we've had to have applicants prove that the use was actually pre-existing to when the zoning was written, and the use has been continuous.
Right.
You know, if you wanted to open a bike shop, we would say, okay, so when was it a bike shop? And
Gotcha.
if it was a bike shop 5 years ago, but it's been a house for the past 2 years. So there are other things that we're thinking about when this was originally presented and we saw it, that we were looking for this documentation in which to understand the condition.
Thank you.
So, thank you for doing the homework.
I have no problem with the project.
Definitely good.
All right, we'll close the meeting and we'll make a motion. All right, I'll have a motion. All right, I will grant a motion for a special permit finding for the project as presented, as it meets the intent of the PIOD. It is in keeping with, not substantially more detrimental. I'm on a roll. Substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. And it actually improves or does not max out the metrics of the PIOD for FAR and lot coverage. We will have one condition in terms of asking the building inspector that a two-family home, that the utilities, what is the requirement for the arrangement of the utilities and services to the house being joined or separated?
No, that would be no problem. If the building inspector's gonna require it anyways,
Yep.
you're gonna have to adhere.
Right. Just ask us. Right, so there's a second to the motion, Mario, second to the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. It's been a long night. I appreciate your time. I really do. Take care.
Okay, good night. Good luck with it.
Thank you.
Be seeing you 15 years after my previous application. Congratulations.
Yeah, well, it's only gonna be for a couple more months.
Okay, so the meeting is closed, but we have a couple of other orders of business.
Yep.
So one, Howie, is that the applications that you sat for are closed. So if you would like to
They're right there. Okay.
continue with your appointment as, or if you'd like to
Well,
reduce your appointment.
I'll just keep it, and if you need me, I'm available.
Okay, so it's up to you at any time, it's up to anybody at any time. This is a volunteer position, you've been volunteering for 22 years. You said you'd like not to renew, and you so favorably rejoined the cause to help the town, so I'm just making sure it's offered that you get to do what you want.
Right. Like I said, I'll be available if, somebody else can't be here.
Yep.
But I'll appreciate it if I don't have to be.
Okay, and the original motion to make, or the beginning business to make Howie, I hope I stated it, that it was that until Elaine returns.
I think you did.
So that it wasn't for just tonight, that it was until she returns.
Right, you did. You
Well,
said that.
can I offer this? I mean, typically the way I would expect it to be done, we do on the planning board, is if you're using an alternate member, you assign that member to sit on a particular public hearing. Rather than, I mean, I guess there's nothing wrong with what you're proposing.
I think just because of the
Yeah.
limited amount of time, and that's exactly why I asked Howie if he wanted to make it his last night, or whether he would just fill out his thing and then we do it.
Yeah, so I mean, in the future, if I was sitting on another public hearing, you might at that time do exactly what you did tonight. Just
Correct, and
explain.
if Elaine is here next week, then Howie's an alternate member, and
Right.
you're an alternate member.
Right.
Okay. So
I'm agreeable.
And when your appointment is up, then we have Jack as our alternate, and we'll use Jack as needed. And again, as we go along, discussions or comments are welcome, you just can't vote. That's the only technicality. And then if someone's not here or the board changes, then we'll have to deal with it.
I don't know, sounds like big shoes to fill, I don't know.
That's why we selected you. You were sought out to be selected, so.
Yeah, sucker.
Thanks for,
May I ask what the schedule is, like when's the next meeting? Is there a
Every
regular schedule?
third Thursday of the month. Now, August, I do have an issue on that third Thursday. It's been a long scheduled work thing that I can't get out. So, could we,
Do you wanna look at a potential date right now?
yep, so can we move it to Thursday, or Thursdays were convenient, Howie, I think. I like the regularity of it, but, what do you think? Is there anything? Mario, what's your schedule?
I'm pretty wide open, no vacation schedule.
And Jack, are you?
The fourth, if there's a fourth Thursday, that will be better than earlier, but it's up to you guys.
Do you normally have something on a Thursday?
No. Thursday's fine.
Okay. Yeah, so I have an August 19th issue. So either we move it to the 12th, we move it to the 18th, we move it to the 26th.
Can't do the 18th, that's planning board.
The 26th then?
And I think that's, if you wanna do it here, let me just double check and make sure that this room is open on the 26th. Hold on a sec.
Got a vacation month, can we skip a month once? or-
Yeah, the only time we skip a month is when nobody comes in with a application.
Yeah, and right now, there's nothing,
All right, so the 26th of August,
That works.
Yep.
that works.
just, hold on a sec.
If you check on that, see if the room's available.
There. Yeah, right now, there's nothing scheduled in here, so why don't I just, I'll put a ZBA meeting in for that night.
Please.
And if there are no applications, then
And we'll take it off. And then the last piece of business is that on the town website, there is another website called My Maps that you can go to, and those were some of the images I was showing. And so there's two ways. There's My Maps, which is open to the public, that anybody can go in and you can type Swan, you can type Old Farm Way, you can type Tracer, and it will come up and it will show you the properties, and then you can select the property, it will go to that, and it will show you the neighborhood, and then there's different layers you can turn on and off. Then, as a planning board member, there is access for an enhanced version of it, in which you can actually draw lines and measure area and look at buildings a little differently. So there is, it's the tool to look and assess something if you need to. So what I would propose is you go and you try the My Maps first, to see if you're really gonna make use of it, and if you do, then you can email Martha, and Martha will get you set up, because you have to send in your home IP address.
No, actually don't, no.
No, you
there's-
don't?
No, there's just, yeah, that's what I was trying to explain earlier, but, there's a login for town board and committee members, so I can provide that for
Oh,
someone.
so that password I got is good for everybody?
That's good for everybody. Yep,
All right, thank you, I'll take a look at it.
yeah, so you
Yeah.
can, I
Has
think
anybody
that,
given you, bylaws yet? I think Martha did. Yeah, okay.
yeah, I sent,
Didn't you send me,
I sent you the link to the bylaws and I think the specific reference to the PIOD, since that's what you guys deal with most of the time.
I've only memorized the first couple pages, but I'm working on it.
Did Jack get a printed?
Good luck copy.
The clerk can provide one, if you'd like a printed copy, the town clerk can provide one.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You know, it gets updated from time to time, so it's always good to compare against the one on the website, because if there's a town meeting and bylaws change, then,
But I think it's helpful to have in front of you, because we come down to reading the definition of it, and obviously making notes and having it helps you find your way through it.
Absolutely.
But I think it would be good to get a copy from the town clerk. That's it.
and I'm happy if you wanna try out My Map. I think there's a link on the ZBA page, and, you know, I'm happy to give some guidance. There are good tutorials, links to tutorials, and it's hosted by the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission.
You may have sent me that too. I looked at something, was it something?
I might,
I think you might have.
I might have, but.
Well, we-
Are you going to move?
Oh,
I'll make a motion to close the meeting.
Okay.
second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Seatbelts on these chairs, Larry.
Yeah.